G'day everyone, welcome back to Brushes with Beck. Today's video is a cat eye detail drawing. This is part of a recent piece that I've completed of my cat Jasper, and today we are just focusing on drawing one of her eyes. So to begin with, I have gone in with the Derwent Drawing Chinese white pencil to just map in the bright white highlights in the eye so they are easier to work around. Now I am working on Fabriano Artistico hot pressed watercolor paper with both Derwent Drawing pencils and Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils. This very first layer that I'm putting down is the Derwent Drawing yellow ochre color. Now I'm going in reasonably heavy because it's a very vibrant colored eye, but I also know that when I blend out with my cotton bud that some of that color is going to be picked up a little bit. It's going to push the color into the crevices of the paper a little bit more so I get a more even layer, but it also does pick up some of that color. So we're just working through the eye and building up from the lights to the darks. So then I've gone in with the Polychromos light yellow ochre to build some of this richer color around the edge of the eye and start to get in some of those little details in the eye, the little changing colors and the little lines that are all through the eye. So you need to make sure you pay really close attention to your reference photo when doing something like this. Make sure it's really nice and detailed so that you can get as much in this eye as possible to help make it look as realistic as possible. So just working through that eye, not pressing too hard because we still want to add plenty of layers yet. So we're just trying to get as much early layer detail on as possible, and just to map out some of those variations in color in the eye before blending that out as well, because we want this eye to be nice and smooth. Now this next color you see me going in with is Polychromos Earth Green. This is a lovely color for a subtle green in this eye. Just some hints around the pupil there, and making sure that when you're drawing these little lines out from the pupil that you are going around the eye like in a circle, like they all point out towards the edge from their relevant position in the eye. So just make sure you pay really close attention to that detail. Don't point them all just sideways because that's not how they go. And just make sure that, you know, those little details are going to help make it look more realistic. So the next color I'm adding here is the Polychromos Terracotta. Now this is going to help me darken up some of the edges and also add a bit of nice rich orange tones into this eye without it being a vibrant orange. So this is a really good color to add some of those orange tones in without, if you don't want to add a bright orange and make it look, very, very bright orange. So the terracotta is a really lovely color for that. I've just added a really light layer of that in. Now here I'm going over with the Naples Yellow, and I'm going over most of the eye here. This is the color that's really bringing out the vibrancy of the yellow of this eye. I'm going heavier in the darker areas of the eye and a little bit lighter in some of those lighter, creamier areas of the eye that you see, because I still want to maintain some of those pale areas so you get an indication of the curve of the eye and that sort of thing. And just paying attention to where the darker areas are and where some of those slightly lighter, creamier spots are that you need to avoid. But just adding that rich color down really helps bring out the vibrancy of the eye. So the brown color that I'm working with here is the Polychromos Bistre. This was the perfect color for areas of this eye to bring out some of the shadows, because there's quite heavy shadow in the top corner of the eye, and some of those little lines that are coming in from the corner of the iris there. Just really getting those in there and adding in some brown tones to really add some depth to that color. Now, remember that an eyeball is round. It's a sphere. So even the side of the eye that is receiving the light is going to have shadows around the edge where the eyeball curves back into the head. So remember that you will have a slight shadow around every side of the eye there where the eye curves back in around, and that's something important to keep in mind when you are drawing eyes, is to have those shadows around the edges to give the indication of the eye curving back in. I mean, there's a lot of important things to remember, but that's something I found really, really helped, is making sure those shadows around the edges are dark enough. Now I'm just boosting up the green near the middle with the earth green yellowish from Polychromos, because the earth green by itself wasn't quite enough. I didn't add too much of the earth green yellowish in, just enough to make a bit of a difference there. And I'm just going in and refining some of those details that I've already added in, adding more layers of color where I think the eye needs it, and just building up over time. It's really important to just go in slowly with light layers and build up that depth over time. And the more layers you add, you will also add more depth to those details that you are adding, because you can overlap them. Now for the eyelid and the rim around the eye there, I am using Caput Mortuum Violet first, which is a Polychromos color. I've mapped in my little highlights in the corners. I used a little bit of Solway Blue, I think it was, from Derwent Drawing, because there's a blue tinge to one of those highlights, and also just white pencil. And I'm going in with Caput Mortuum Violet to map out these areas, put in my dark corners, and define what I'm working with. Following that, I'm using the Derwent Drawing Chocolate. It's a nice dark brown, very rich color, and going over that Caput Mortuum Violet and adding some depth and some really deep shadows to those edges. And just building up that color and darkening the Caput Mortuum Violet around the rim, and really defining some of those shapes, because there's quite a lot of intricate detail to those shapes around the eyelid of the eye. Now I'm finally going in with a little bit of black there. That's just the Polychromos black to darken up that top shadow just above the eye there from underneath the fur. That's probably the darkest point on the eye, so I need to make sure it was nice and dark, and then I can relate everything back to that shadow. So working more around the eyelid, I'm using Walnut Brown to really darken up those edges and darken up the shadows on the eyeball where I think they need to be a little bit darker, and just around the eyelid as well. Everything's just about building up those layers and working from lighter colors to darker colors. But as you can see here, I'm also going in with Naples Yellow to brighten up those colors as well. Even though I've gone in with the Bistre and the light yellow ochre, which are darker colors, but I'm just adding that Naples Yellow to add a brighter pop and some depth to that eye, with adding that vibrancy to the yellow there. Refining some of those browns again and that detail with the Bistre, and just working back and forth through this eye, because as I work through and work more on the eyelid, I might see that some areas around the edges of the eyeball actually need to be darker, like you see me doing now, and really pumping up those values in the corners of the eye to make it look more rounded. Now here I am using the Ivory color from Polychromos. I'm using that to blend out those lighter areas of the eye so that they're not as grainy from the texture of the paper, because I want to make sure it's really smooth and glassy, like an eye actually looks. I've used a little bit of Derwent Drawing green shadow around the edge of the iris, sorry, not the iris, the pupil here, before going in with the Derwent Drawing ink blue for a base layer for that pupil to get a nice, really deep black. I'm following that with Solway Blue. There's a few more pale areas on this pupil, like you see me going with that light yellow ochre around the main highlight. It's because doesn't have a very sharp edge on my reference photo. It sort of has a hazy edge, like a sort of a flare out from that highlight. So I've gone in with the light yellow ochre there first to put that in, before going in with the Payne's grey to I'm sort of solidifying the pupil a bit before going in with the black by using the Payne's grey. And here you can see I'm using the Polychromos black to really just make that pupil pop, really darken it up, make it a nice solid color. And because I already have that base layer in there, the color's nice and rich. I don't have to worry about gaps or paper texture coming through too much, because I've done the base work for this pupil. And as you can see, I'm leaving it a little bit lighter around that highlight where that sort of, that flare is around that highlight. And a couple of spots along the edges of the pupil where I put in that Solway Blue, because there's a few subtle highlights there, some lighter areas of the pupil. As you can see, when I zoom out, I'm just comparing the two eyes there and seeing what I need to adjust on the first eye that I've done. That's almost the whole piece complete at this stage from this video, as you can see, but next week's video is going to be of the complete piece of my Cat Jasper's eyes. So stay tuned for that video next week. And while you're at it, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and please subscribe to my channel for more coloured pencil content. Now, getting back to that eye, I'm adding some raw umber around the edge along the eyelid, just to add some yellow tones in there, and also adding in a little bit of Bistre. And before going back in with the Caput Mortuum Violet, and I'm also using Walnut Brown because that's a very nice dark brown and really strengthening those shadows in around the eyelids and deepening those up. Now that little eye corner there, I did adjust it from my reference photo because I think in my reference photo she had a little bit of eye booger in there, so I didn't really want to include that. I've started with the Walnut Brown just to map out the lights and darks a little bit before going in with the light yellow ochre, Caput Mortuum Violet, and then blending out with cinnamon on this one because I wanted to give it a lovely flesh tone for that, and that worked out really, really nicely. And just using that cinnamon a bit around the rim of the eye as well, sort of to tie it all back together. So at this point we're pretty much done. I did have to expand on the top eyelid and the shadow above the eye, as you'll see me do. I use the Polychromos black to do that because I realized that my top shadow above my eye and the eyelid wasn't large enough. I had to compare it to my sketch that I had on my tracing paper and go back in and expand that using my black to go over some of those fur strokes that I had put in above there. And that was a bit of a scary process because I worked really hard on the fur above the eye there and I basically just had to cover it up. But fortunately, that was a very easy adjustment. I made, it was quite a noticeable mistake that I made, but because of the way that I made it, I was just going in with black over the top of lighter colours, so it was very easily corrected. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, although if I'd made it the other way around, it would have been much harder to correct. So that's pretty much the end of this video. I do hope you enjoyed it and that I wasn't too rushed in what I was saying. As I said at the beginning, this is my Cat Jasper's eye. And she actually recently, I mentioned it in my last video, she had an injury on this eye. She had an ulcer develop and she actually had to have surgery for that. And the stitch for that came out just this week and she is on the mend. It's looking like it's healing really, really well. And she is much happier now that she no longer has to wear the cone and have medicine 3 times a day. So thank you very much for watching. Like I said earlier, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, subscribe to my channel. Look forward to next week's video where you can see the full process of me drawing this close-up of Jasper's eyes. Once again, thank you very much for watching and stay creative.